and I'm live. So I just had that thing again where it just spun and spun and spun and didn't actually go live on me. But I'm here now. So, yes, my birthday, I'm indifferent to it. I'm not bothered one way or the other. Obviously, it's not my birthday until Thursday. No, Wednesday. I don't know, whatever day it is. Yeah, Wednesday, actually. Birthday on the 19th. Lose time through the story. Yeah, I wonder what time you lose. Yeah, Wednesday. Make sure everything's recording. Seems to be. So, I suppose I better start this properly. If you find this interesting or helpful, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe if you end up liking this and wanting more of it, and leaving any comments below. This live sleep meditation creation session will work like all my others. I will chat with you guys for about 20 minutes, then spend about 10 minutes getting ideas from you on my notepad. And then I will turn that into something. So that's kind of how it works. And anyone who's watching this after it's happened, if you just want the sleep meditation, feel free to jump in. There'll be a timestamp in the description and in the first comment. Feel free to just jump in at the timestamp or skip to about 30 minutes in. Yes, time has kind of changed a bit, I think, knowing what days there are and what months there are. Hello, thank you for jumping in and joining here. So hopefully everyone's not too tired. I know I am. With it being my birthday this week, Abby's off, and so I've obviously been trying to get everything edited and sorted out. Ideally today, I haven't finished it, so I'll have to turn my other computer on after I finish here to carry on. And then, yeah, I'm trying to get everything done today so that I don't have to do too much through the rest of the week. Yeah, quite good if you can do everything just in your pajamas. Yeah, the challenge is me stopping working, because obviously with things like my e-courses, I have to pretty much constantly respond to people's to people's questions and things. I can't just think, right, I'm not going to respond to questions for a few weeks or even for a week, because literally on my e-courses, I think people forget that the e-courses are worldwide. And so I get messages where I'll wake up in the morning at say 8 a.m. and there'll be a message that came through at maybe 1 a.m. or something, and then another message on my course complaining at about 2 a.m. saying, "Why have you not responded to my message yet? I asked a question, I want an answer," and then a message at like 4 a.m. complaining, saying, "You're a terrible instructor. You should be responding to me. I've been asking you questions." and I'm asleep through the whole of that and not able to do any of it. Um, so I do actually say on all my courses, I try to reply within about 24 to 48 hours to try and set expectations. But my experience with online stuff is people don't read anything. So people don't read my descriptions on my videos normally. So I get questions saying, "Oh, you should make a podcast of your stories." Yep, look in the description. You should put them on Spotify. Yep, look in the description. You should do this. Yep, look in the description. Have you ever thought of writing anything? Yes, look in the description. Look on my website. Um, so I think people don't really bother reading things. Um, but yeah, but with my e-courses, yeah, if I could reach a point in the future where I don't need to do them for the income, I would definitely stop them all, um, so that I don't have to constantly respond to student questions. So yes, hello to everyone who's jumping on here. I thought that said you're very buttery today. At least it's not anywhere near as hot as it was last week. Last week I was sat here with sweat pouring down my face and just literally soaked through while trying to do this. Thank you for making it to the live. Yeah, there are some of my sleep meditations designed specifically um, for pain because they've been requested during the live chats. So I've added bits in for that. But yeah, generally, lots of the stuff in the stories helps with pain as well. In fact, literally just being able to relax helps with pain. If you can relax, that significantly reduces pain. Um, Hot here, I only do Celsius. Hot here was, I think it reached 36 or something Celsius. So it's most likely not hot, obviously, compared to places like Phoenix. Um, for me, anything over about 22 or 23 is far too hot. But there's also something odd about the heat. So when I went on holiday and when I visited Dubai, um, it can get into the 40s Celsius, and it doesn't feel hot in the slightest, which I find really interesting. Um, it kind of, well, no, it does feel hot, but it doesn't feel hot. It's a completely different kind of hot. Over here, it's a kind of hot where you're literally soaking wet, dripping with sweat, um, and it's really uncomfortable. When I've visited Dubai, it's much hotter, and yet you just feel very comfortable. You're dry, you're not sweaty, or barely sweaty. I think the only time that I ended up sweating was Abby and myself when we were in Dubai. We went on a bit of a trek, went on a very long walk, um, and I had to go and buy myself a new T-shirt. I bought one from Zara in Dubai with a robot on it saying automatic movements, which obviously links to hypnosis. Um, so yeah, but over there the heat is totally different. It's a very comfortable type of heat. It's very dry heat rather than uh, a very humid, horrible heat. I try and offer lots of different types of things on my channel. So there's sleep stories of different lengths. There's ones that are, say, under 15 minutes long, uh, ones under 25 minutes long, ones between 25 and 35, 35 and 45, and then over 45 minutes, I just class as long sleep stories. And they go up to about 90 minutes. I think the longest is a little bit longer than 90 minutes. Um, and then there's compilations. So people who want something that's just going to be on all night long, so that if you wake up at any point during the night, um, it'll you'll hear my voice and you can just focus on that again and fall asleep again, just gently in the background. I do the sort of all night type ones that are like 6 to 12 hours long, or 11 hours long. Dubai was okay. I like that the rules are followed significantly better over there. You don't get people drunk all the time everywhere, uh, kind of out on the streets, being aggressive and violent and drunk and noisy and all the rest of it. Everything's quiet and calm. People, at least in public, are very, very respectful generally. Um, yeah, I can only make compilations at the rate that I create the the stories. So there's loads of 8-hour compilations, and my view is that really people only need one 8-hour compilation because that's one night's worth. They don't really need more than one, but whenever about 4 times a year, I have enough stories to create a new compilation. So about 4 times a year, I create a new compilation. So there's the compilations uh, from previous, like 2018 and backwards, from 2019, and then from 2020. So there was a compilation for the first 3 months of the year. There'll be another compilation for the second 3 months of the year when I get round to it. The trouble is that when I post compilation videos, it negatively impacts on my channel because it never used to. It's very odd. In the old days, so going back a few years, whenever I posted anything long, like compilations, um, they got lots of views, and people kept on saying that's what they really want, these kind of all night videos. But when I post them nowadays, they get very, very few views on them comparatively. So one of them has just started getting more views again. But since I posted them in 2019 onwards, the ones I posted from 2019 onwards weren't getting anywhere near as many views as I was expecting. And the trouble with the way YouTube works is that if you post videos that don't get many views from your own audience, which means that then YouTube doesn't show it to other people, so they then don't get very many views from other people. And then because it's not getting very many views overall, YouTube then thinks, well, it's clearly not popular because if his own audience aren't watching it, and we're not showing it to many other people, but the ones we're showing it to, they're not really watching it, then no one's interested. And so we won't show it to anyone. And so they then don't show it to anyone, or very few people. And then randomly, every now and then, they'll just show something. And like I think they've done with my volume one of my 2019 sleep stories. I think recently YouTube has shown that to people, and that's what's made a few more people subscribe to my channel, because YouTube has shown off the 2019, I think recommended it. And every YouTuber is always hanging on for the time that YouTube decides to recommend one of their videos, so that you can get uh, more of an audience. But YouTube bases it on a few things. So if you go through all the courses that YouTube teaches, they say that they want you to have a high click-through rate, so the number of people who see the video and then decide to click through on to see what it is. and that definitely counts for your own audience, because your own audience are supposed to be your best fans, and so if they don't watch the videos you post, something's got to be wrong with the video as far as YouTube's concerned. And then what percentage of the video is watched? So if I post a long video, um, one difficulty, so say an 8-hour video, one difficulty is that it will show that people have watched maybe 2% or 3% of the video. But the reason for that is because it's an 8-hour long video. And so YouTube then thinks that video, so I get the analytics that say this video, people watch 70 or 80% of it. That's incredibly popular. And it will say, if you click on more information, so we'll promote that to other people, because it's you know, people who watch it watch most of the video, so they obviously like the video, so we'll show it to more people. Whereas if it's like when we show it to people, they only watch a small percentage of it, then they don't show it to so many people because not many people are getting far through the video. So posting long videos, yeah, I've definitely not got a tan. Well, I haven't been anywhere or done anything. So yeah, so posting long videos, if they become popular, then obviously that's a good thing, and if people use them all night long. But yeah, so the analytics are very comprehensive for YouTube. So they tell you things like who's watching what. I think I just saw that question somewhere. Watching while at work, cool. Try not to get caught. Just looking and seeing what questions I might have missed. No, maybe I didn't miss anything. I was sure I saw something saying, "How do I know who's watching or who watches what?" Yeah, I think it's difficult because somebody raised this, back to something I did just read. Um, Somebody raised on one of my videos saying, "Are you going? Is this the norm now? Are you uh, going to only make long sleep stories? Because nearly everything I make um, on these live videos turns out to be a reasonably long sleep story." And the thing is, that's the predominant thing. Like going back, for those of you who've been around for quite a while, going back to 2018, I wasn't really doing sleep meditations. I would do the occasional one over the years, but I wasn't really doing them. I'd done a couple, and people were saying, "Can you do something longer?" Because they're all like 25 minutes or whatever. Um, that's not enough time to fall asleep to, and people were asking for something longer, and so I ended up making like an hour long one or 45-minute long one or something. And people started saying, "Can you do more of them? Can you do more long ones like that?" And so I initially sort of tried to do it once and found it incredibly stressful to try and do that, and so said, "Okay, every time I hit 1,000 subscribers, a sort of compromise, every time I hit 1,000 new subscribers, I'll do a long sleep meditation for you." And so that way I thought I don't have to do too many, but I'm sort of getting something out of it as well. And so it's a bonus thing on my channel. And so I started doing a few more long stories, sort of 45 minutes or longer. Um, and back then, they were significant. If I posted something that was, say, 30 minutes or 35 minutes, say 25 to 35 minutes, it would get maybe 1,500, 2,000 views across the first month. And then I would post the bonus, I've just hit 1,000 subscribers. Here's a 45-minute story. And it would get about 8,000 views in the same time period, 8,000 views in a month. And so, and that was the case all through 2018. If I posted my normal sleep meditations, they'd get about 1,500 views if I in a month. If I posted the long ones, every time I hit 1,000 new subscribers, they would get about 8,000 views. Um, but because I wasn't really doing sleep meditations back then, they were always just a bonus thing that I did occasionally on my channel, because of my channel focusing on mental health. Um, I didn't really. I sort of stopped the long stories in towards the end of 2018. Didn't do anything until turning my channel into a sleep stories channel. And so one thing I thought once I was doing the live things was, let's do some more longer ones again, because that's what people had always found they really wanted. Because I'd have people that said, I'm asleep in 5 minutes, but I get anxious that the story I might not be in the story might end. So I like the long ones because um, then I know that I don't have to be anxious that it might end before I've fallen asleep. So even though I always fall asleep in 5 minutes, I know that if I don't, the story's still going to be there. And that makes me feel relaxed, which helps me to fall asleep quicker. So people were saying things like that. And then others were saying it takes me a good 25 to 30 minutes to fall asleep. So I like to know the story's long enough to fit all that in. So that was why I was, and then I did a poll, and I think it was like 90 something percent of people said they wanted long stories and not short stories, not like 25 to 35-minute stories. And I said how hard it was to do the long stories, and that's unlikely to happen unless I can do the live streams like this, because this is the only way my channel can get consistent long stories. Um, but as I say, the other day, somebody commented on one of my videos pointing out that I hadn't been doing any shorter stories. So it had been um, March, I think, the last story under 45 minutes. And so, yeah, so it had been quite a while. And so I decided to post a shorter story. That short story has done really bad in terms of how my stories do. So I might not end up posting more shorter stories. It's a difficult one because people want the shorter ones. Um, but at the same time, that because they want the shorter ones, but most people want the longer ones, I then have to decide, do I do, there's already like 100 or whatever it is, shorter stories on my channel. Do I do more shorter stories? And there's something like 40 or 30, or I can't remember, I counted, I can't remember how many, longer stories. So I reached a point of thinking, do I do shorter stories to cater for those? As a YouTuber, you're constantly trying to think, what are the things that get the views? Because you need the views to keep being able to afford to keep doing the job of posting stuff. Right, in a minute, I'll ask for ideas for today's one, but let me just flick through some of these comments. Yeah, obviously, one important thing is making sure that the volume isn't turned up too high. The idea of it is that I should just be almost like background noise. So you don't want to be straining to hear my voice, but like any other sleep meditation, you want it on so that you can just, and like with doing hypnosis, the idea when someone does hypnosis with a client is that your voice should almost be, you're just a guide. Your voice is just background guidance for the person to follow along to. It should be no more disturbing than hearing the background hum of traffic outside the window, or um, hearing just everyday subtle nighttime noises. It shouldn't be something that draws your attention to it. So it shouldn't matter. For example, some people will say, when I stop talking and then start talking, say 4 seconds later, part of the difficulty is if someone's hypnotized, 4 seconds can seem like many minutes. I made a video on this back in something like 2008, where somebody had left a comment saying how angry they were that they were jolted awake by my enormous pause that I did in my story. And so I listened through the one that they commented on, and the longest pause in the story was 4 seconds long. But they said when you paused for so many minutes and then started talking again, it jolted them awake. So what happens with hypnosis is, and with meditation, is that when you stop having internal dialogue and you stop focusing on things, you lose any reference to time, because there's nothing left. There's nothing you're counting time with. There's no words being spoken in your mind. There's nothing there that can mark out how long is passing. And so what happens is that you're in sort of a state of nothingness. And when something then does happen, it can feel like an enormous amount of time has passed. So, time distortion is something that obviously hypnotists talk a lot about in terms of it being spontaneous. It happens spontaneously during hypnosis. And I know that it happens spontaneously to a lot of people who listen to my stories. But one way to make sure that when I start talking again, it doesn't jolt you awake is to make sure you got the volume set correctly, so that I'm literally a background sound that you can just hear my voice enough to guide you, so that you can hear it enough to understand what I'm saying, so that you can follow along, you can carry out the suggestions I'm giving you about visualizing certain things or whatever, but you're not having it so loud that when it stops and starts, it's a jarring thing. It should just be a background, uh, low level noise. Right, I'm just seeing, I haven't scrolled all the way back up, but I'm just scrolling back down to see if there's anything I've missed. Yeah, you can probably autoplay. The risk of autoplaying though is that YouTube might show you another ad between them. The thing with visualizing is there's nothing, no one tells you you have to visualize. So saying, yeah, you get anxiety because you're not a visual thinker, and so having to visualize for longer periods of time is stressful. There's no reason why you have to visualize. You're just following along to a sleep meditation. Um, there's no reason at all. I think when people are trying to force themselves, I get this question, for example, when I teach my rewind course, my treating phobias and trauma course, that people say, well, what if the person can't visualize? What if this? What if that? It literally has never, ever in 20 odd years been a problem. There's no reason. Everyone's a unique human being. No one says you have to. I barely visualize. It's incredibly rare for me to visualize anything. And I listen to these sort of things all the time. There's nothing. No one says you have to kind of try, and you don't want to try and force anything. You want to use it how it works for you. Um, yeah, can't please everyone. But then that's also why I do make as much variety as I can. So there is lots out of 200 odd stories. There's lots of different things, different length stories, different types of stories. Right, I think I've missed a load, but I was trying to go through and see because there's a lot of comments today. Not normally so many comments. Yeah, I got rid of a significant amount of nearly all my new stuff. So by new, I mean stuff that I've done since about 2015. The pausing is significantly shorter than it's ever been before because people complain a lot about it nowadays. Whereas the thing I used to be praised the most for, going back when I started on YouTube and going back, I'm going to be starting this story late, and going back to all of my hypnotherapy work and teaching, would be that I would teach and people would say, "Oh my god, the pause that you did, where I stopped talking for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I just dropped so deeply into the experience and had such a profound experience during that period of time." And that was an incredibly common thing that I'd be told, never anything else. I would never get told that pause was horrible, it's too long, except that never got told to me. It wasn't until like 2015 or something that people started saying that on YouTube. And then because it's become such a popular comment about how my pauses are too long, even though most of my pauses are literally seconds. It's quite rare for anything in the last 5 years to have a pause longer than say 6 or 7 seconds. So just trying to get down the question, see if there's anything important. I was no more relaxed or peaceful doing that story than any other story. Um, it was done exactly the same as I always do. I was sat in this exact chair, looking at this exact same computer with this exact same microphone on me, looking at an exact same list. It was just me doing what I do on camera, but with sleep meditation creation session number one in front of me. So the first meditation creation session that we did last year, I just flicked all the way back to the notes for the first one and thought, okay, let's just create another story based on the notes from the first meditation creation session and see how that turns out compared to the previous one. Um, I can't even remember what the story was, the first ever one of these. And I was ridiculously stressed doing it. Everything was going wrong. I was overheating. It was far too hot. It's so noisy. People were banging around upstairs. So I think it was 30 minutes long or so, 31 minutes long. But the original is nearly 50 minutes long with all of the interruptions and the banging and the swearing, me swearing, obviously, um, and just me getting so angry during it and thumping the chair and all sorts of things like that. All of that obviously is edited out with just the story left in. So there's about 20 minutes of that left out. And I made three back to back over about 4 hours. All of them are identical in terms of how they went. And Yeah, so they're all identical in how they went. And they were all from the what we wrote down for the ideas in, I think, the first and second sleep meditation creation sessions. Right, I'm nearly at the bottom, and then I can quickly get some ideas. Yeah, I pretty much have never really visualized anything. I would love to be able to visualize well. I used to visualize as a kid better, but never as an adult. Yeah, so nothing inspired me. I literally did the same as I always do. I just went down. I can't even remember what it was about, but I just went through making it like normal. Yeah, I don't recommend making playlists on using the playlist to play back-to-back stories. I have them on Spotify so that you don't have to do that. I have them on the Sleep Stories podcast so that you don't have to do that. I have them on Apple Music, iTunes. I have it all, so many audio places if you want just the audio to listen to back to back. Um, and I do that so that, and then I create the compilations specifically. So I would, if I thought people are using the playlists, I wouldn't make the compilations. I wouldn't make, for example, the 10-hour compilation, because what would be the point if people are just listening to the tracks that are in that on a playlist? So I only make the compilations so that people don't have to use the, because I actively discourage people to use the playlists for that purpose. I think playlists are good for searching, so that you can say, I want a story about diving. Let's find underwater playlist and see what stories are about diving. So I can pick one of them for tonight, turn off autoplay so that it doesn't play the next one, and then pick the story and listen to it. Um, so yeah, so it's very interesting that people are saying, wherever it was, I can't even find it now. Literally just read it. Um, about me seeming more relaxed during the last story, given that it definitely wasn't. But anyway, it's late. I'm running late. Let's get some ideas. A tea party. There's one. So any other ideas? Chicken. Yeah, I'm not going to do a birthday story. Well, I wouldn't even know where to start. Birthdays are just days. Cottage. I'm not going to do cakes. I get moaned at for the amount of food in my stories. Clouds. Pyramids. I've done pyramids in many other stories, obviously, if that was the question. From the Egyptian cats through to various pyramid adventures. I used to do calligraphy, but I obviously needed a special pen because of being left-handed. Still using my purple pen, by the way, for those interested. I got as a birthday present. On Wednesday, I will be 42. I thought I said happy birthday, weeds. Makes more sense for it to say happy birthday Wednesday. Right. I don't really believe there is such a thing as a weed. So, starting a bit late, but I can put a timestamp in. Yeah, that's my view. Is that weeds are really things that someone has decided is in the wrong place. But who are we to decide what's in the wrong place? Yeah. Well, it's my own fault that I'm behind schedule because I don't normally scroll back through the live chat to see what I've missed, but because so many of the comments were big, like bits of text comments, like things to read, I scrolled back to try and make sure I was reading some of the questions and things rather than missing them, just in case it was important to read them or respond to them. I have to get my hair cut soon. Right, so I think I've got enough to work with there. Remember that there's the premiere happening tomorrow night, 11 p.m. my time, and I planned on doing a second premiere maybe Friday or something like that, and then there'll be the one on the Mind Changers channel on Sunday. So yeah, 3 videos coming up this week, hopefully. I'm all recording. Yep, means I have to be present rather than just setting it and then going to bed and ignoring it. Just making sure I can read my handwriting. So, take a moment to allow your eyes to close and allow yourself to begin to relax. And as you begin to relax, I don't know whether you will relax deeper to the sound of my voice or to the spaces between my words. And as you begin to comfortably drift asleep, I'm just going to tell this sleep meditation in the background. And it's a sleep meditation about someone at home, and they decide that they're going to clear out the loft, and they haven't cleared out the loft for a long time. It's one of those tasks that they keep putting off. And so this day, it's raining outside. They can hear that rain on the window. They decide that as it's a grey day, it's a good day to head up into the loft. And they pull down the ladder, climb the ladder into the loft. They can smell that loft smell. They can hear the rain on the roof. And they turn on a light in the loft. And they look around at all the boxes stacked up in all the corners. And they walk over to one of the boxes, take it down off of other boxes. And they're going to go through and sort things out. And the first few boxes they sort out really easily. They go through those boxes and it's just paperwork. It's things that some of it gets kept, some of it gets thrown away. But by the time they're down to about the third or fourth box, they start finding more personal content. They find some old love letters. They find packs of photographs. And they start going through those photos. And even though they know that they should be just cleaning up and not stopping to look through things, not getting distracted, they find it almost impossible to avoid being distracted. And they sit down cross-legged on the floor. And they're looking through a pack of photographs. and they see some photographs of a trip to Paris, taking photos up at the Eiffel Tower, taking photos looking out from the Eiffel Tower. And they find a set of photographs, all individually taken. They notice that they carefully piece together. So they lie them down on the floor. And they carefully start, almost like a jigsaw puzzle, fitting those photographs together to create a panorama of Paris from the Eiffel Tower. And the photos don't quite fit perfectly. And there's something that adds charm to how careful those photos were taken. And yet each one was just very slightly off from the previous one. The camera held at a slightly different angle. Whereas nowadays they know that they could just stand there, press the shutter, turn around, release the shutter, and a panoramic photo will just process and look fine. And looking at these photos and the imperfections in the photo and in the way it was taken helps them to just drift back in their mind's eye to memories of a simpler time, to memories of a time where you would try and learn, you try and gain some skill at doing these things for yourself rather than just pressing a button and having a device that does it all for you. And recalling those days when it could be weeks after you took the photos before you have an opportunity to go to the shop to get the film developed and to then discover which photos turned out okay, which ones turned out blurry, and only discovering it weeks later. And as they reminisced, they thought about how that was almost like having a second holiday, that there'd be something exciting about being able to get the photos developed weeks later and revisit that holiday with those around you and recalling again the different things that you did and took photos of. But you would often take a lot of photos that wouldn't be particularly good, that nowadays you can just delete or perhaps never even look at. And you could only take a small number of photos per film. And so each shot became more special. You would know that you only had 28 shots, perhaps even 30. And so you didn't want to just use them all up on the first thing you see. And by not using them all up, you spent more time looking, taking in the environment, taking in places you visit. And they started thinking about how simple that time was. And as they sorted those photographs, they moved on to the next box. And they sorted more photos from that box. And then they found a box that contained stuff that they just put in storage that was handed down from their parents. And they opened the box and they could see old photos. They would call them black and white photos, but looking at them, they looked more like shades of brown. And they're really old photos. And they found one that had three people sat on three separate camels, and they're all wearing old army gear. And in the background are three pyramids. And they looked closely at that old photograph, that grainy photograph. And they imagined what it would be like to be there in Egypt, what it must have been like for that old distant relative. They decide that they would take a bit of a break from sorting things out. And they sit, relaxing against a wall, listening to that rain outside. And they let their eyes close. And as they hold that photograph with their eyes closing, and the sound of that rain, so they imagine themselves back in Egypt, imagining the sound of sand slamming into the outside of a tent as a sandstorm rages outside that tent. What it would sound like for that tent to be shaking, vibrating in that wind. And then waiting for that sandstorm to begin to calm down before opening the tent and heading out into that bright sunshine and looking in all directions and just seeing sand, and then noticing the pyramids standing tall and walking towards those pyramids. And then finding the way into one of them, following a tall but narrow path into that pyramid, climbing a ladder, following some stairs and a slope, with the sounds of the desert fading away into the background. Before coming out into a chamber and stepping into that chamber and having the footsteps echo around the chamber and shining a torch around that chamber and seeing golden items, and going to the back of that chamber and noticing that the hieroglyphs on the walls look so well preserved, as if they could have been made yesterday. And instinctively running the fingers down the wall, feeling the texture of the wall, the feeling of those hieroglyphs. And then running the finger around a hieroglyph of a cat, and feeling that it feels almost like it's a little bit loose. And yet, on touching this, they had assumed that they were all carved, all chiseled into the rock. And pushing on that cat, and then hearing a rumbling, seeing some dust fill the lower part of the chamber as a wall slides open, and finding a path deeper into the pyramid, and following that path deeper and deeper into the pyramid, knowing that you're probably the first person since this was built to ever go through here. And as they go through, they find themselves in a chamber that's so large the torchlight barely illuminates the walls. And in the center of the chamber, they can just see this purple, spinning, glowing, throbbing orb, almost like it's pulsing with energy, almost like it's crackling with electricity. And they walk over to that orb, and as they near it, they have this sense that they can feel that pulsing passing through their body, almost like it's something tangible, not just a sound of pulsing. I have this sense they can feel that pulsing almost in the air. And they wonder if it's like an electromagnetic pulse that's so powerful, perhaps it's interacting with their body. But they feel compelled to approach and get closer and closer to that orb. And as they get closer to it, their hand starts to reach out. And as the hand gets closer, so they start to hear what they can only describe as tribal drumming, starting to fill the chamber, echoing around the chamber. And then when the hand is almost touching that orb, there's one last pulse of light, a brilliant white light that fills the chamber. And they find themselves standing in snow. Only the snow isn't cold or hot. They're just standing in snow, and it's a comfortable temperature to be stood here. And in every direction, they can just see snow, and the sky is white. And they can't differentiate the horizon, they can't differentiate the ground from the sky. Looking down, they can see that it looks like snow. Taking steps, it crunches and feels like snow. Reaching down and picking it up in their hands, It feels like snow. It seems to melt in their hands like snow. Yet it's not cold or hot. It seems to just be the same temperature as them. And as they look around, they can't see where the sun is. They can't notice a shadow. And they're curious where this place is and what just happened. And while they look around themselves, suddenly, almost as if the pulse completes, everything reverses, that whiteness disappears, and then another wave of a pulse strikes, and they find themselves now standing in a meadow, looking out over some hills, seeing the most beautiful blue sky. But again, they can't see the sun in the sky. And they look around themselves. And again, everything just feels a comfortable temperature. And they don't seem to have any shadow. And then it's almost as if that pulse completes and this disappears. And another pulse happens. And they find themselves standing on an island surrounded by ocean. And again, there seems to be no sun in the sky. And the temperature feels the same as it's always felt. And then that pulse completes. And as it does, and as they get that glimpse of the orb, they make sure to push their hand down onto it, to finally fully touch that orb. And as they do, another pulse happens. And they find themselves in a forest. They can hear the sounds of birds, the rustling of the leaves. And here they can see the shards of light from the sun dancing through the branches, through the canopy, catching particles of dust in the air. Cutting across their path. And they look around and they wait for the pulse to end. And the pulse doesn't end. They manage to walk away from that location. They manage to begin to explore this forest. And they're curious where they are. They head through the forest, and in the distance they can hear a waterfall. They walk towards that waterfall. And at the waterfall, They can see that that water is flowing down into a lagoon. And they climb down the rock face next to the waterfall. And it's a surprisingly easy climb. And as they walk away from the waterfall, so the water calms, that flow slows down, and they see that at the far end of the lagoon, they can notice the sea, and that this area looks like it's connected to the sea, but there's a bit of a barrier, so the tide has to be high for the two to connect. Then as the tide goes out, so that separates this off from the ocean. And around the far side of the lagoon, they see a cottage. They decide to head round there to investigate. And in the back of their mind, they're still expecting that pulse. They don't know where here is, but they wonder if maybe someone here can give them some answers. So they head around, they go to that cottage, and outside the cottage is a jetty sticking out into the water. And on the end of that jetty is someone just sat there incredibly still. And they look into the cottage windows. They can't see anyone in the cottage. And so they walk to the jetty. They walk down the jetty. They sit down on the jetty next to the person. And they try to strike up a conversation with this person. And this person just sits there, motionless. And they take a good, hard look at the person. They try to notice movement in their eyes, in their face. They try to notice the movement of their breathing. They can't notice any movement at all. And they wonder if perhaps this person is meditating so deeply that they're breathing incredibly slowly. And so they watch and focus, trying to notice the slightest sign of movement. And yet they don't see any movement. They then wonder if this person perhaps is somehow just totally stationary, almost like a statue. That they seem almost like waxwork in how still they are. And they reach over and they touch that person on the arm. And the person doesn't flinch, doesn't respond at all. They lift the person's arm up and it just sticks in the air where they put it. They wet the back of their hand. They hold their hand under the person's nose to see if they can notice the breathing. They don't notice any breathing. They start wondering whether this really is a lifelike waxwork. But just as they move their head closer to take a really close look at the face, the person opens their eyes and looks back at them and smiles and greets them, and they almost fall off the jetty, being startled. And they ask how this person was so still. And the person explained that they just went deep inside themselves to do some inner healing, and that they can help this person to learn how to do that too. And they said that they were curious if they knew anything about that pulsing orb that seemed to have brought them here. And the person said that they do. They know what it is. And they can explain. And then they closed their eyes and carried on meditating. And this was a little frustrating. So the person got their attention and said they'd quite like to know. They'd like to know more about the orb, where they are, and when the time is right, how to return to where they came from. And so the two of them stood up from the jetty, walked back to the cottage, and sat down in that cottage in the most comfortable chairs. And then the person started to explain about those orbs, explain that there's more than one, that not everything is as it seems. That they're actually a piece of technology that's far more advanced than anything that they could ever imagine. That they are far more advanced than anything they could ever imagine. That they're not a person, they're actually a robot. And they don't breathe, but they are conscious. And that they were designed to look human. And that there are many of them. They can repair themselves. And they're placed in the locations to be guides for those who exit in the different locations. And that the orbs work in an unusual way. That as you approach them, they cycle through the different locations programmed into them, showing one location, then the next location, then the next location, until they've shown all the locations, and then they start back with the first one again. And that the user needs to touch the orb to stop the orb on the location they want to visit. But until the orb is stopped, each location is almost like a holding screen. It's just a representation of that location. And they explained that an easy way to explain it is that it's a bit like seeing different holiday destinations, different images of different destinations. And then when you've made your decision based on the image of the destination, you can then go to the destination. But there's a difference between the image and the real place. And so it's just like that, except that it's in 3D, it surrounds you, that you see that place just for a second or so before it moves on to the next one and then the next one. And then it can transport you to the one you choose. And to return, all you have to do is go back to where you came through. Stand in the same spot. And the orb will be there even though you can't see it. You just have to reach out to where the orb will be. And that when you reach out, you'll notice there's a slight temperature difference at the location of the orb. And so you can reach out and touch where that temperature difference is. And that'll be the orb. And then it'll pulse and close that reality. And you'll be back where you started. And the person said that they didn't believe that it would be possible to make robots who look so human. And so the robot popped its arm off and handed its arm over and said, "Take a look at that." And with curiosity, the person turned that arm around and they could see what looked almost like optical fibers at the joint. And those optical fibers seemed to be moving almost independently, as if they were searching for something. And as he took his arm back and started moving it close to his body again, the person noticed that the optical fibers where the arm was removed from and in the arm seemed to be reaching out for each other and then connecting just as the arm was being put back in place. And they explained that just because they're a robot doesn't make them any less human at heart. That they still have capabilities, still have feelings and doubts. And this person's fascinated by this individual. And they get told, "I just want to show you something." They stand up, they walk through the cabin, they go over to a bookcase. They take a book off of the bookcase. They say, "Here, hold this a minute." And they hand over a book. And this person thinks that maybe there'll be something interesting in that book. But as they're focusing on the book, so they notice the the sound of sliding and movement. And they look up and see the bookcase has slid open to reveal some steps. And then they take the book back, they put it down on a side. They begin to walk down those steps under the cottage, and then down some more steps, and then more steps, then around a corner and down even more steps. And they head deeper and deeper under this cottage. And then the walls seem to turn to metal. And they're now walking down metal corridors. And they find themselves in a large metal room where the walls are a bright silver colour, almost as if it's been highly polished, highly reflective. And the room looks virtually empty. They walk to the middle of that room, and there's one chair, and the robot gestures to that chair. And the person sits down in the chair, has what's almost like a helmet put on their head, and a visor pulled down in front of their eyes. And they start hearing a pulsing sound at the left ear and the right ear. They notice that the pulse is different at both ears. Then they notice a pulsing light in front of each eye. And they realize the pulsing at each eye is different. And then that pulsing speeds up. And then after a while, they begin to have a sense of the space between the pulses, where their brain creates a binaural pulse, a pulse that's actually an illusion. And the brain begins to synchronize with that pulse. And what starts as just flashing light in their eyes begins to form into light colours moving around their field of vision, almost like pastel spots, pastel pinks, pastel purples, pastel greens, moving, dancing around their vision. They feel a certain focus and stillness setting in as those pastel spots begin to form an undulating green ground and white sky. And as the pulsing speeds up, so out of the green ground begins to form trees. And out of the pulsing sound, they begin to hear the sounds of birds, of children laughing. Then they begin to notice some blue, almost like water, and start to have this sense of a beach. And they're aware of that pulsing speeding up faster and faster at their ears and their eyes, until they stop being aware of the pulsing and just become aware of the experience. And they stop being aware of themselves sitting in that chair with that helmet on, that visor down, and instead being aware of walking down a sandy beach, seeing grassy hills, seeing a beautiful blue ocean rolling in on the shore, hearing the distant sound of children laughing and playing and splashing in the water, the sounds of birds in the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun, and being less and less aware of themselves, of the pulsing. And they walk up to someone who seems to be painting on the beach, and they ask what the person's doing. And they talk about how they're painting this picture, not painting what they see with their eyes, they're painting what they feel with their heart. They're painting a representation of the experience of being on the beach, hoping to capture the experience. And the person looks at that painting, notices some bits familiar, can work out other bits and their reference, what they mean. And the person explains to them that it's a very personal experience, that the only person that can truly understand this painting fully is the artist. But everyone who looks at it once it's done will have their own understanding and interpretation of it, and their own experience. And they'll experience this beach in their own unique way. And they find this fascinating. And they wonder whether perhaps they should take up painting. And as they look at that painting, the person says, would you like to just have a go? Just paint a few strokes on the canvas. That could be your contribution. And then as the artist, I'll know when looking at it that those bits were done by the person I met here on this beach. And that'll become part of the experience of the painting. And so the person picks up the brush, moves that brush around over the water. And as they do, they start to hear a bubbling sound. With the bubbling sound, they turn around. And they find themselves in an aquarium. And they're walking through this aquarium tunnel. They can hear the bubbling around them. They see a giant ray move up the side of the tunnel, over the top, and so calmly and peacefully down the other side. They see sharks swimming so gracefully, slowly through the water. The gentle sway of seaweed in that water. The dancing lines of light from from the surface of the water, reflecting down around the bottom of the aquarium, hearing the sound of gentle music, walking slowly through the tunnel, exiting the tunnel to see a large glass wall, and through that glass wall they can see those sharks, those rays, numerous different fish, and they can hear other people milling around the aquarium, children excitedly going up to look at different fish. And they head through the aquarium and down into a very dark part of the aquarium, seeing UV painting on the walls, seeing a sign saying no flash photography. And then finding themselves in the abyss section, seeing jellyfish pulsating in chambers, in columns of water, just moving so gently and slowly, pulsating with light, and other deep sea creatures, many with bioluminescence, all seeming to move so slowly and peacefully, with gentle, peaceful, relaxing music playing in the background. And then leaving the abyss section. And while leaving the abyss section, opening a door and finding themselves on the echoing floor of an art gallery, seeing different artwork, different statues, and then noticing on one wall is the painting they just applied some paint to. And they go over to that painting, they look at the description, and they realize that the lengthy description talks about them contributing to this painting and shares the artist's views of the painting. And there's a sign that says, "Do not touch." And they read that sign as they reach out, while looking around them at the corner of their eye, and just gently touching the painting at the point that they painted. And while they touch that point, so the art gallery disappears, that pulsing seems to slow down and then gradually turns to black, and the pulsing at the ears slows down. And then it all comes to a halt. They take the helmet off. They find themselves in this chamber deep underneath the cottage. They talk with this robot about the experience they had. And they're told that some inner healing was going on then, that it's often interpreted as some kind of sensory experience, but that's just a representation for what's going on deep in the brain as your unconscious now is healing. And the robot walked the person back to the stairs, up all of the flights of stairs back to the cottage, picked up that book, put it back in place, and the secret door slid shut again. They left the cottage and went back down to the jetty. And this robot stood on the jetty, talking to them about the experience, sharing other knowledge with them, while they gazed into the water at the fish swimming just beneath the surface, just watching as they swim and move around. And then the person headed back round to the other side of the lagoon, climbed back up the rocks, found their way back to where they came from, and then moved their hand around to find where the orb is, could feel that warmth at their hand, and then feel the pulsing beginning, and then found themselves back in that chamber. And they walked away from the orb, and as they walked away, so the energy seemed to calm down, and that pulsing seemed to calm down. They found their way back through the pyramid, all the way back to the tent. They settled down in the tent, and they were thinking to themselves that this is all just a dream, and they wonder when they're going to wake up. And as they think that, they could hear the rain again, and their eyes gently opened. They found themselves back in that loft, surrounded by photos they'd been looking at. An old family trip to an aquarium, and various other trips they've made and their family has made. And they continued to sort out which photos should be kept, which should be thrown away, to sort out other stuff in the loft. They felt a deep sense of satisfaction from working through the loft, organizing things, removing what isn't necessary, making everything organized that is necessary to keep. They removed the stuff from the loft that they were going to get rid of. They left the loft, turned the light off, closed the hatch, and decided that they'd reward themselves with a quick drink and some food before heading out into the garden now the rain has calmed down, to enjoy the fresh air, that smell you get after the rain has removed a lot of the pollutants, a lot of the particles from the air. And so they sit outside, looking out over their back garden, breathing in that fresh air, smelling that after rain smell, wondering what they'll do from here, now having a desire to travel, to explore some of those places their family had visited, to revisit some of those places they had previously visited. And they don't normally act impulsively, but they decided to head out on a camping trip, to recapture some of that simpler times, to enjoy being in the moment, rather than viewing every moment through a piece of technology, to almost reward themselves for their connection with their past, to follow in the tradition of their family going on camping holidays where they didn't have a lot of money, and so they would go for the experience. And they remembered always being told the journey is part of the holiday, that too many other people are desperate for the journey to be over with so that they arrive at the holiday rather than enjoying the journey as part of the holiday. And they thought about that idea as they travelled out and went on a camping road trip, pulling over, moving well away from any built up areas, camping for a night before driving on further, finding another location, avoiding built up areas again, and camping for another night, and really feeling a deep connection with their past and with a different way to approach the future, to be able to know what's worth attaching to, what's worth letting go. And then after spending some time out camping, they travelled home, aware that they'll have to go back to work. And so they prepare for how they can put into practice what you're learning here, to be able to handle stress, to be able to handle things when they get overwhelming, to be able to step back in the mind and see what's important and what isn't important, and what you can and what you can't do. And what's worth focusing on. And then on arriving home, They head to bed and they fall asleep so easily, so effortlessly, so soundly asleep. And as they relax and drift asleep, they're aware that when they awaken in the morning, they're going to awaken feeling so full of energy, feeling revitalized, feeling awake and alert for the day. And with those thoughts and drifting into pleasant dreams, dreams that bring a smile to their face, they drift and float so peacefully, so comfortably asleep, drifting and floating so peacefully, so comfortably asleep.